just sort of felt it has sort of felt like as each hour has passed since Saturday's match, that we wanted to make sure that we had as much information as possible,
Mhm.
essentially, before we decided to talk about Mallory Swanson and the injury that occurred during the first half of this match. And that's where we're going to start with this episode. How this came about. Mallory Swanson was stretchered off of the pitch in the opening half of this game against Ireland. Took a couple knocks. Kind of got ping ponged around really early in this match. There was some physicality going on, probably in the opening 20, the opening half hour of this game. There was a previous collision in the game, just Swanson unable to stop her momentum, combined with some contact, kind of falling. It looked like shoulder first into the knee of Courtney Bronson of Ireland, and there was a moment in stoppage of play there. After some evaluation with the medical staff, came back onto the pitch, and then the United States went ahead and kept trying to crack at it and get the opening goal in the match. And then we saw a very kind of brief collision. It just sort of looked like two players kind of coming together, one in a defensive kind of manner, looking to make a tackle, dispossess, and what looked like a plant with the left leg of Mal Swanson, and she just immediately went down and grabbed her knee. And I think within that moment, um, lots of oh no's kind of
Yeah.
hitting everyone. I think whether you're her teammates, whether you were present in Austin, Texas to watch this game, whether you were someone like us taking it in on the television or on a stream, your I think immediate reaction is just like, that is not good
Mhm.
for the player or the team.
Even watching, if you weren't able to watch the game live and then seeing the reaction on Twitter and social media and kind of seeing the fallout, my heart breaks, and our thoughts and prayers go out to Mallory Swanson and this painful, devastating injury that she occurred. It's officially reported she has torn her patellar tendon. It's the tendon that basically connects your kneecap to your other bones, and the way that it ruptured in the pictures, and as soon as she goes down, it is pretty graphic and it's pretty scary.
Yeah.
It made my knee hurt watching the video and then watching the pictures live, not showing any of them here on YouTube. But it was truly devastating. The way that her teammates around her on the pitch reacted as well was also immediate. I mean, you could tell that she was just in devastating pain as soon as it happened. And her teammates joining around her. I mean, Rose Lavelle immediately sitting down next to her, grabbing her shoulders, trying to calm her in any sense. Which in that sense is impossible to do. And then the stretcher coming out onto the field, and this injury occurring in the very end of the first half. Like, it was around 40 minutes or so. And of course, by the time the stretcher comes out and the gator, almost, it's like a golf cart, kind of comes out and takes her out, she seems to have it calmed down a little bit, perhaps given a little bit of numbness and medicine to kind of stop so much of that excruciating pain that's happening. And then she does get carted off the field, giving up a heart to the fans in Q2 Stadium in Austin, and saying that, basically saying like, thanks. You can see her talking to people in the video as she's like being carted off the field, like saying thank you, waving to the fans. And I guess she said to Vlatko Andonovski, like, "Coach, I'm all right, coach," which honestly, that breaks my heart a little bit more, because this is a player that, I mean, Mallory Swanson has been through so much. She has been through so much in her soccer career. Everything from being a 16-year-old on the World Cup team many years ago to then suffering a number of injuries and having to kind of get cycled out of the U.S. women's national team roster. And she's worked her way back in the last several years and become stronger than she ever was before. She had to change her mindset and her mentality to kind of get to the level that she was at. I mean, she had secured her starting spot in the front line for this U.S. women's national team. Devastating to see. And our thoughts and prayers are with Swanson for sure
I
and
mean,
her recovery.
I mean, she was going to the World Cup. Like,
Oh,
let's like
yes,
say
that
it
was
was.
without a doubt, without a doubt.
Um, that's how that's part of what's so devastating about this. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no final roster that has been named, right? And credit to these players, and in fairness to them as competitors, whenever you talk to any of them, they preface this journey to the World Cup
Mhm.
is like they're competing, they have to make sure they earn their spot, et cetera, et cetera. They're locked in, right? But I think at this point, when you're 3-ish months out from a World Cup and you're looking at the pool of players who have been available for this team for the better part of the last 2 years to 18 months, you're looking at them and you could maybe even narrow down, say, like, there's probably somewhere from 15 to maybe even 18 players that you can point out and say, this is a player that's going to a World Cup.
Mhm.
And Mallory Swanson was one of those players. I think when you
Yeah.
look at this team and their build up to Australia and New Zealand, and maybe that's where I've been at. I think at sort of post game and then listening to any updates that we were given as media with Andonovsky in the post game press conference. Obviously, the early update that took place Sunday. I think in between that limbo of time, I think folks try to wonder or assume or
Mhm.
guesstimate, like, what it could be. I think there's folks, the medical, I think, field were reacting to this as well. That was part of what was so, I think, telling to me in as far as the caliber of player that this has got all this attention. I think at one point when I just happened to look on a timeline, I think there were sports medical professionals trying to,
Yeah.
like, collaborate and ascertain, like, oh, like, what could have we have possibly seen here? Like, that is the level of impact that this player has at this moment. The most informed player for the national team since this
Completely.
year started.
Yeah.
So
And more will come out about kind of what happened, right? Was there anything internally that went wrong or with
yeah,
the knee? Because this injury, it happens, the tearing and the rupturing essentially of the patellar tendon, but it's not that common. We don't see it all the time in soccer. And the fact that it was essentially non-contact, it was her plant foot. And that's what happened when she planted and then went into the tackle with her right foot. It's her left knee that
yeah,
happened. That was her plant leg. And that's kind of when it ruptured. And yeah, a lot of people
yeah,
speculating, a lot of people guessing, and even people in our chat joining us live on YouTube, like, how long is this? How long is it going to take?
yeah,
We don't know. And I mean, like, you can WebMD it if you want yourself, like a patellar tendon, depending on how much it's torn, if it's torn completely, if it's ruptured completely, the damage that's done, it can take up to 6 months, it can take up to 12 months to repair, it can take up to 3 months to get back to form and where things go. We don't know. Sandra and I are not medical professionals. We don't know. And we haven't
no
talked to
doctor.
Swanson about it. So, but
Yeah.
those are it's devastating. She is out for the World Cup and she was going initially.
Yeah, I just think in terms of like what that means for the team moving forward, I think
Mhm.
it's jarring. I mean, it presents a new set of questions for this team that hasn't existed for months. I mean, when we look at things positionally for this national team, if we go line by line, I think you can take a look and make an argument that there's certain question marks within each line.
Mhm.
I mean, we've seen rotation within the back line for probably the better part of the last 18 months, with the inclusion and rise in form from somebody like a Naomi Girma, and the rotation there. We have seen new players rotated into the midfield as recent as January
Mhm.
for this team. And you know what didn't maybe have those question marks? It was your attacking line.
Yeah.
And Smith and Swanson and Morgan have been the trio for this team for the better part since, let's just go back to July for CONCACAF qualifiers. Let's just go there. And maybe for, folks, they're like, oh, well, 8 months together isn't a long time. But I think when you're making that comparison to some of what we've seen across some of the other lines, that has been the most consistent line and factor for this team. And it's one of these moments where I think when you look at it on the competitive side of things and in that angle, there's the competition around you is not going to feel bad for you for very long. You look at even like a national team program like England, they're going to a World Cup without a Beth Mead. Somebody for Spain like Alexia Putellas is just getting back into form with Barcelona. Like, there's not going to be a lot, too much sympathy for this national team, as the World Cup gets closer. And I think maybe while you were trying to tighten up or ensure other things and maybe the other two lines on the pitch, you at least knew that going into this World Cup that's your attacking front line was something that you maybe didn't have to worry about. But now that's no longer necessarily the case. We're likely to see maybe some answers in the second game, in terms of who's going to get the start and what they may and what the coaching staff might roll out with.
Because Trinity Rodman rotated in as soon as Swanson went out, so she finished out the end of the first half, Rodman, and then finished out the second half and the entirety of the game. So that was who initially was rotated in for Swanson during this injury.
Yeah, and so I think maybe folks are looking for like those silver linings, and maybe that could be one of those silver linings. I mean, within this update for Mal Swanson, U.S. Soccer did a couple things. They said, here's the update. This is what it is. She suffered a torn patella tendon in her left knee at the end of the first half. She returned to Chicago for further evaluation. So maybe a silver lining there. Chicago's a city with great orthopedics and able to maybe get her, a further diagnosis. What's the grade of the tear? What does it look like? What are the next steps? Right. And then the other part of that is the fact that this national team program is a literal machine. Trinity Rodman, someone able to sub in at that moment. Lynn Williams is on this roster. And U.S. Soccer in this same announcement also said they've called in 18-year-old forward Alyssa Thompson to sort of close out this 2-game series against Ireland. So young player, up and coming, number 1 draft for Angel City, just earned her first caps with this team in October of 2022. Big debut. I mean, she was with the team during the pair of friendlies in Europe while they went to go face England and Spain. And she was also called in to close out the 2022 calendar year as the team prepared to face Germany, though she did not get minutes against the Germans. So I think,
and Alyssa Thompson wasn't called in during She Believes either.
No. I mean, at that point, she had already been drafted by Angel City. Yeah. She's like taking those first steps as a pro. But what we've seen out of the opening 2 weeks, maybe that's what we talk about NWSL play kind of having an impact for players. Scored in her regular season debut in week 1, earned a penalty kick against Orlando in week 2. So I'm curious to see if she gets some time. Ireland, honestly.
I think she will, honestly, because to bring in a player like this, like clearly she's on the bubble of the World Cup roster. And now, yes, sadly losing Swanson, it opens up another spot for players. And when you look at who else could have been called into this roster halfway through this April window, Midge Purce is an option out of Gotham. She was on the She Believes Cup roster, but instead Black Wananowski chooses to go with Alyssa Thompson. So I think you get her minutes to see, hey, is she ready to compete at this level? I mean, yeah, there's plenty of different options there that Blacko can go with. And yes, like there is, as you said, this program is a bit of a machine in which the way that they can churn out top level players, but do they have the experience? Do they have what it takes to score in these high pressure moments? And I think that Mallory Swanson is one that has kind of been through the conveyor belt of this machine a few different times because she started so young and she hit her peak. And then a lot of people think she fell off. and she worked her way individually. Swanson back into this roster and back into top form. She had 7 goals in this calendar year, Sandra. This is a big loss for the United States. 8. 8. I'm so sorry.
I'm like, I think 8. Look,
8.
everyone
There
could
you go. Like,
everyone could go ahead and check us in the chat if they want 7 or 8. But the leading goal scorer for
the
this
leading goal scorer, right? She scored in all these games. In She Believes Cup, she was just going off and going crazy in them. It's a big loss. It is a big hole to fill, and there are plenty of players that can step up and fill. Thompson being the one initially called into this camp, Rodman getting the minutes on the field in place of Swanson, but it's going to be a conversation. It's going to be a topic for Vlatko Andonovski, an issue that he never wanted to have to deal with, that no fan ever wanted to see. But next man up. Kind of, let's see how it goes. It's a very big hole to fill that Swanson leaves.
Yeah, for club and country. I know we haven't chatted too much about how that's going to affect her club team, like someone like Chicago Red Stars, but I think it's effective to say that that's a major loss for them as well. Perhaps bigger even of a loss than for the national team.